I can change what I put on my breakfast plate, how I study, how much I use my time for this versus that. Do I play video games or do I not? Do I hang out with this person or do I hang out with that person? It's all up to me. I am in complete control because I don't care what that group of kids says about me. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I need to do. Now, today what I want to do is I want to go over the 3 big truths, the 3 big principles behind students' decision-making process and ultimately their decisions that they make. Because no matter what, these 3 truths are what I have found to be so, let's say, truthful in my work over the years, as well as just as a human being. And the reason why I want to break this down today is because every time I do a gig, what I like to do is I like to really always get feedback both from the students, from the administrators, and I am always trying to make my program even more clear. And I think I've done a pretty good job at making it clear and concise, but I always want to make it even more clear. And I realize that through the stories that I tell and the activities that I do with the kids and the outcomes that I deliver and the learning objectives that are listed in the program, it actually really all boils down to these 3 truths. And I think this is a great opportunity to go through them. And I'll kind of break down some of the parts of my program and how they fit into these 3 truths. So let's get into it. Truth number 1, principle, truth, whatever you want to call it. Number 1, your decisions stem from your story. Now really think about that for a second. Because when we do, all of a sudden it's very clear. If you tell yourself one story, then you're going to make a certain set of decisions. But if you tell yourself a different story, your decisions are going to change. Tony Robbins talks about this. He always says, is the beginning or the end? And as whatever it is, whatever you think of Tony Robbins, it's true, right? If you think that it's the beginning of your journey, you're going to take very different actions. You're going to make very different decisions than if you think it's the end. Right? When students are dealing with high school, which is a very difficult 4 years of their lives, at the same time, the best 4 years, if you were me, and if you have that perspective, if you tell yourself, what's the point? If you tell yourself, I am never going to be fast enough, strong enough, pretty enough, smart enough, whatever it is, well, you're going to make certain decisions. I'm going to tell you what they are. You're not even going to get off the pot. You're not even going to start the process. How many times has a student failed at something and they said, yep, see, I told myself, what's the point of trying next time? I'm not going to, because this is exactly what happens. I failed. I knew I was going to. Of course they're going to make this different decisions. So when they tell themselves a different story, everything changes. For instance, if it's a failure at whatever, they didn't make the team, they didn't get a part in the spring musical, they went up to somebody and they said, I like you. And that person said, cool. Actually, now it's not even I like you. It's just swipe right or whatever. If they tell themselves, I'm not strong enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough yet, all of a sudden that one word changes everything. They don't have to rewrite their entire script. They have to literally change one word. And then everything becomes easier. Everything becomes better. Everything becomes that much more acceptable to be able to start that process again because they know they've got a shot. And again, it's a lot harder than just saying, oh yeah, say the word yet and everything changes. It's a process. It takes practice. It takes knowing patterns of your thought process and knowing patterns of how your mind works, to be able to catch yourself, to be able to have that trigger in place to say, oh, wait, I'm going into a negative thought pattern. Okay, here's this, here's that, and then this is what I have to do. So it's very, it does take practice, but it is the truth. Your story dictates your decisions, right? Your decisions dictate the quality of your life, but your story dictates your decisions. So I think one of the things that I do in my program is I talk about, I do a couple things. One of the things is I do a demonstration with a water pitcher, and I'll have a water pitcher and I'll bring someone up on stage or in the pit, and I'll start using their life as an example. We'll go through, the people in their lives, family, friends, whatever. And then we'll talk about what else takes up your time and attention. Well, school, projects, texts, quizzes. And what else? Well, my hobbies, and I'm on the football team, and da-da-da. And all of a sudden, they've got a really full picture. And we tell ourselves, okay, well, if we're going to deal with this stress of our life, this overflowing, stressful life and all these events in it, well, then we can hold on to it for a while. I say, is that picture heavy? And they're like, And I say, okay, well, can you hold it with your arms straight out for the next 40 minutes that I'm up here speaking? And they're like, probably not. So what happens? Does a pitcher get heavier? No, pitcher doesn't get heavier. It's our ability to endure. Our endurance does not last. Our endurance to hold through these stressful and anxiety-ridden parts of our life, we need some type of a support system. So if we change the story and say, I don't have to do this on my own. I can get help. I can get support. I can go talk to somebody. Then it's a whole different story. It's a whole different set of decisions. So I have the student place the pitcher down on the table, and it's obviously extremely easy now to hold on to the pitcher because all of the weight of their issues are being supported by the table. They got a support system. So instead of trying to take on the world themselves, they went and got help, and they've changed that story, and now it's much easier to deal with the problems and stress of their life. So that's just one example. I do a few different things, but I want to move on to truth number 2. Principle number 2 of decision making is that your decisions have consequences. Oh. But you think when I say that, the word consequence has a negative connotation. But I don't mean negative. I also mean positive, good or bad. Your decisions will always reveal their consequences. And what's even trickier about this is that it may not be one big decision all the time. Yes, if I get behind the wheel of a car, potentially that decision could be life-altering / life-ending. We don't know. Other times, it could be an even possibly worse decision because what could happen is you've skated by. You were just lucky. And you got home and nothing happened. So now, what do you tell yourself? Again, coming back to the story, oh, well, it's okay. I can do that again. I can pull it off. No big deal. Until something bad happens. Like I said, it always reveals consequences. When students decide the micro decisions, every single time that they study, if they're studying from a textbook, say, and they're not just looking over like handouts or different things like that, if they're studying from a textbook and they're reading and they're trying to actually interpret what's in this book, which is one of the more difficult ways of studying, if they always have a highlighter next to them and they always get in a really good idea, a practice of highlighting, or if they always write little notes and questions in the margins, this is a tactic. But if they employ that tactic every single time and they make a consistent decision, well, then that will have a different consequence in their ability to learn and retain information. It's very simple. But again, these are micro decisions. It's like, what do we have on our breakfast plate every single morning? That's a micro decision. But if we change that decision, if we make that good decision every morning to say have egg whites or whatever versus sugary cereal, it might have an effect. It might have a more positive or maybe negative consequence depending on what you eat. These are all different things. But again, going back to the major decisions, that could also be an issue, right? We can say something to somebody and it could be not even ill-intentioned, but it could be bad. That other person can take it really hurtfully, and it could be very damaging to that other person, and we don't even realize it, but that's a consequence. So that's a lack of being mindful. Getting into the car when we shouldn't be, that's a lack of mindfulness. That's a lack of being in state, in the moment, both physically and mentally. So again, in my program, a couple of things I do is tell you students today are way too stressed, overwhelmed, and anxious about their lives and their futures. This is why I do what I do. As a youth speaker, I teach students to step back from the situation, see the choices they have in front of them, make great decisions, and build positive patterns around this process. Whether it's substance abuse, bullying, or stress about their digital lives, the students I've worked with have had some great success. So I want to work with your students. I want to come down to your school and your event and actually teach your students the art and the science of making great decisions. So click the link below and schedule your call with me so I can learn a little bit more about what you're looking for in your next speaker. Do is I teach them some ways that we can adapt mindfulness, whether it be journaling, whether it be breathing, whether it be meditating. These are a few tactics that I want them to walk away with and decide whether or not they're going to implement in their lives. However, they're going to do that once a week, every single morning. It doesn't really matter to me, but I want to give them that tactic to say, hey, there's a reason why journaling helps us. There's a scientific reason why meditation actually changes the chemistry in our brain. There's all these things that are positive tactics that you can employ in your life to become mindful. So therefore, when you make a decision, you can be aware that they have consequences. Because if you were like me in high school, you will be blissfully ignorant. You will go through every day, happy-go-lucky, for the most part, and you will say things to people, you will hurt people, and you won't even realize it. And that's not good. Not at all. Moving on to the third and final truth of a teen's decision-making process. Our decisions are ours and ours alone to make. This is not your mommy and daddy's life. This is not your grandpappy and grandmammy's life anymore. This is your life you're living. This is their lives. This is the teenagers in front of you. It's their life. It is their decisions to make. If they decide to take out a $150,000 loan for a degree in communications, that's their decision. If they decide to go to a trade school, if they decide to open up their business, I'm not judging. I'm not saying anything that they should or shouldn't, but that's their decision. Now, here's the tricky part to this. And this is something that Gary Vee talks about all the time. If they are on the payroll, if their parents are paying for school in any amount, well, then they have a certain amount of say. So if they disagree, now a lot of times this doesn't necessarily come up, but many times it does, right? And especially in immigrant families where the parents are they're conditioned that college is the way out of the immigrant cycle, and they have to be an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer, or whatever, and the kid wants to be a designer. Well, then there's a big problem. There's a big disconnect, and it comes down to, well, whether or not who's fitting the bill. So when it comes to their taking accountability to their decisions, sometimes parents or relatives or some outside forces will have some say/effect on their ability to take full accountability. Now, if a child is really 100% serious on, say, for instance, in our example we're using, going down a certain career path, well then, I mean, they can do it. The government will give them as much money as they want. They'll be, no matter what, have to pay it back. So again, at 16, 17 years old, is our students ready to make that decision? Do they have enough life experience / development in their world? Like, I don't know. I don't think so. And that's another topic for another day. But I do think that it's really still tricky, because now when we're talking about certain different decisions, the accountability factor, the fact that they're making their own decisions, is really, really crucial for them to understand. Because when it comes down to certain things that are a little more complex, but that are just within, say, their social circle, within their school, it's the most empowering thing ever once they get past the fact that, yeah, they're going to have to own up to the things they screwed up on. If they did something or said something, if they stole something, if they broke something, they're going to have to own up to it, and they're going to have to face their consequences. But after that, some of the positive things about this accountability factor of their decisions is just so awesome. It's so freeing, because when they can realize that, oh my God, okay, I am in complete control of my destiny based on what I do. I can change what I put on my breakfast plate, how I study, how much I use my time for this versus that. Do I play video games or do I not? Do I hang out with this person or do I hang out with that person? It's all up to me. I am in complete control, because I don't care what that group of kids says about me. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I'm going to do what I need to do. And that is just so, so powerful. When I was a junior going into my senior year, the crew that I used to hang around with in junior year, I started to realize that I think it was that we were kind of not moving in different directions, but I think we had different focuses in our life. And there was another group of guys and guys and gals that I actually made a more conscious effort to hang around in my senior year of high school. And that's rare. Like, you don't usually change cliques in your senior year, but I did, because I recognized these guys as not necessarily the most popular people, but they had a more genuine quality to them. And I'm just talking about in big groups, not necessarily one or two guys, but in just like the big groups, I kind of wanted to just be part of that energy a little more. And I made a conscious effort, a change. I made a conscious decision to kind of hang out with more of them and a little bit less of this crew. And it was really interesting, because I got to just see a different side of friends and a different side of life, and have just different experiences, not necessarily better or worse. It just was just different. And I'm glad I did that. But remember, that was my decision to make. It wasn't like I had any problem with that other group of friends. I just was losing a little bit of touch with them, and I just saw things differently. And I still hung out with them randomly. It was fine. I hung out with these other guys a little bit more. And again, that was powerful. That was really, really powerful. And I think that's it for today. I think it's a great place to end, because these three truths are exactly that. They are truths. They are scientifically an absolute, because again, if you tell yourself a different story, you're going to make different decisions. No matter what you do, your consequences will reveal themselves. And finally, your decisions are yours to make. It is your life. It's your teenager's life. It is not anybody else's. So, I hope you enjoyed my little rant today. Hope you enjoyed my chat. This is kind of the basis of my program, and this is how I'm going to be presenting it a little bit more formally within these three principles of decision making. So I really appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode. This one actually means a lot to me. And I would love to hear your feedback. I'd love to have you leave a comment. Let me know what you thought today, and let me know about maybe a situation that one of your students or your teens found themselves in, and which one of these principles that they could have been useful or they could have or should have realized and went through that learning process to then ultimately make maybe a different decision. I'd love to hear that. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you tuning in and watching. If you like today's episode, then hit like, hit subscribe, and hit the bell notification to be notified every time I release a new video. And if you like today's episode, then I probably think you'll like this one right over here.